Hey everybody, my name is SPAZ and I'm a CD junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to talk about an Australian band by the name of The Sports, but I'm also going to cover the solo career of their lead vocalist, Stephen Cummings. Now, usually in a CD Junkie episode, I like to tell you how I got into the band, and that's basically just because I walked into a record store late 79, early 1980, probably Licorice Pizza in Garden Grove, and was flipping through the records, and I would buy anything by a band whose name started with The. So The Jam, The Last, The Romantics, The Lambrettas, The Records, people like that. And of course I saw The Sports and I thought, oh, I got to get that. And so I took the album home and, I hadn't even heard it yet, but I knew that, oh, this looks like something I'm going to dig. So I took it home and I loved it. I mean, the songs were great, and the guitar interplay was great. They had two guitarists playing completely different things, and that's always interesting. And the vocalist, Stephen Cummings, was great, and I liked the production. The production's a little tiny flat, and you knew that the band probably was just a monster live. You knew that they probably just broke those chains and rocked out live. But the album itself was fantastic. And of course, Who Listens to the Radio eventually got some airplay, and people knew them, but they didn't really catch on too much in the United States of America, which is very, very, very sad. They were kind of lumped in over here with Graham Parker and the Rumor, Elvis Costello and the Attractions, Joe Jackson. People kind of lumped them into that angry young man type thing, and they really weren't part of that. I mean, they might have been angry and they might have been young men, but they weren't part of that scene. They were really, really coming from, the basic rock and roll, rockabilly and rock and roll and 60s pop and Kinks and Who and Australian influences, and there was some soul and some country, and it was really fabulous because, they just had a really unique sound. Well, I discovered that the band had a first album before that, and Reckless is their debut album, came out in 1978. The band had formed in 1976. This right here is the deluxe edition. I think the album had like 10 or 12 songs, and now it's got like 100. It's not really 100, but there's like tons of bonus tracks. A lot of it rare, B-sides, alternate versions, stuff like that. Now this album here, this is the album that I got into them on, that I started telling you about, Don't Throw Stones. Now this is a slightly different cover than the American version. And the track listing, they had taken some songs off the Australian version and replaced them with other songs for the American edition. But I think most everything is probably on this expanded 2 CD edition. And these things sound fabulous. They sound, like I said, the records kind of made the album sound like the production was a little flat. This just bolsts that up, and it sounds really beefy and much more powerful. And that was 1979. 1980, they came out with an album called Suddenly. Now, this album had a completely different album cover in America, which I'll show you right now. Now, I prefer the American cover, to be honest, but same album tracks. See, Suddenly and Don't Throw Stones were the only two of the Sports 4 albums that were released in America. So by the time they released Sandra in 1981, that's their 4th album, I think Cameron Allen produced this, and the production wasn't great, the songs were, and it was a very strange, odd record. A lot of great commercial moments, but also they were trying something different. I don't know if they ran out of steam, but the Sports split, and then it took a couple years, but then Stephen Cummings came back, and he released the album Senso. Now, this CD here contains his first 2 solo albums, Senso and This Wonderful Life. Now, I'm going to show you right now what the Senso album cover looks like, but you can see here that there's bonus tracks added to this version. And Senso came out in 1984, and it was more of a kind of a funky synth pop, soulful album. it really wasn't that straight-ahead guitar sound that the Sports had. It was a different direction, but it was still very much Stephen Cummings. In fact, the Sports guitar player, Martin Armiger, I think co-wrote most of the songs and produced the album, but it was very... I don't want to say it's a synth pop record because it wasn't, but it was a very soulful record. He followed that up in 1986 with the album This Wonderful Life, and I'll feature that album cover separately. And again, you can see on this 2 CD set that it features bonus material. Now, This Wonderful Life saw him moving away just a little bit from the R&B sound, but there was still that soulful sound with maybe a little more guitar. Then he followed that up in 1988 with the album Lovetown, which is on this 2 CD set. And Lovetown has been called like one of the top 100 Australian albums of all time. And it's a mixture of guitar and soulful and funky, and it's just a great collection of songs. Lovetown is the first one featured here. It's absolutely a great record. Then he followed that up in 1989 with the album New Kind of Blue, which is another great collection. And I'll feature the album cover separately right here. But here is the tracks on A New Kind of Blue. And as you can see, there's bonus stuff there. So, again, I believe you can get those albums separately, or you can get them in this 2 CD set. Then he followed that up 2 years later with Good Humor. This was 1991, and it has a nice mixture of his more guitar-oriented stuff, along with some really funky, updated, dancey songs. This was an album that came out next, called Unguided Tour. That came out in 1992. This is, I think, just a great turning point in his career. But they sort of had to mop that up a little bit, so they released Roller Coaster, which is a collection that features sports material and then tracks off of the solo albums that I talked about already, plus a few new tracks as well. And this came out in 1993. In my opinion, the monumental shift in Stephen Cummings' career happened in 1994 with Falling Swinger. This was the album produced by Stephen Kilbey from The Church. And it does have that Stephen Kilbey darkness to it, but there's such a sense of reality. This is kind of like Stephen Cummings' feet landing on the ground and saying, this is the way it is. And with every album after this, it was like he was saying, this is who I am right now. So deal with it. And this version here contains an EP bonus CD with it. And he does a couple covers, including 2 George Harrison covers. He does Beware of Darkness and Isn't It a Pity? And so that's a really, really great album. He followed that up 2 years later with another Stephen Kilbey produced album called Escapist. Another just grand collection of songs. This album here came out in 1997. This is a compilation called Puppet, Pauper, Pirate, Poet, Pawn, and King. And this contains some of the later material that we were discussing, like the songs off of Stephen Kilbey. And, of course, that there are some previously unreleased tracks on here, some of which are my favorite Stephen Cummings songs, or amongst my favorite Stephen Cummings songs. Spiritual Bum followed in 1999. Another great album. And this is, more introspective, more filled with more melancholy, filled with more, maybe a sense of loss. But his music may not be joyful, but is filled with passion and joy for making music. I could be misreading that, of course. Then along came Skeleton Key in 2001. Another great collection. This is, continuing on the tradition that he started with the Falling Swinger album. Like I said, his feet firmly on the ground, and he was just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do. And it didn't all follow the same format, but, it stuck pretty close to the same format. Until, of course, 2003, when Firecracker came out, it was pretty much the same type of, coming from the same place emotionally, but this is kind of like his rockabilly album. So it's not really rockabilly, but, it's rockabilly. Imagine, a couple guys with an acoustic guitar and sitting around a room. So it's not, Stray Cats and stuff, but it's really, really digging back into the roots of early rock and roll and country and hillbilly. And but it's fantastic. Absolutely. This is one of my favorite Stephen Cummings albums. 2004 came the album Closeups, which is a collection of acoustic versions. There's some sports songs on there as well as solo material. And this was an acoustic album for the Liberation acoustic series. And that's a great collection. 2005 gave us the great Love-O-Meter album. Another stellar collection. 2007 gave us Space Travel. Another great collection. In fact, there's an early picture of Stephen Cummings. I think that's the same picture they used on the cover of his sort of autobiography. But another fine Stephen Cummings albums. When it comes to collecting Stephen Cummings, any of the albums like Falling Swinger onwards are great to start with, or even if you want to start with that one, that'd be pretty good. But I'm still not done. Still got some more. The only Stephen Cummings album that I'm missing in my collection, apart from live things, because I'm not a big collector of live recordings, there's a collection that he put out himself. He probably only sold it at gigs or online, and I never got a hold of it. And it's called That's My Caveman. And sadly, it's missing from my collection, even though I seem to have a heck of a lot. But 2008 gave us the ironically titled Happiest Man Alive, but maybe it wasn't ironic. Maybe he finally came to terms with that melancholy feeling that just is sprinkled throughout his albums, and such a wonderful feeling, when you listen to those and you really connect with the songs, and he's real honest, and he's just a fantastic artist. Tickety Boo was next. This came out in 2009. I mean, look, you go from Happiest Man Alive to a Tickety Boo. Sounds like fun to me. Then came Good Bones, another acoustic album where he travels his back catalog, sports and solo, and does acoustic versions. And then 2012 came Reverse Psychology. Now, this is just random. I ordered it from a website, and he didn't sign it to me, but it says, "Love you, Stephen Cummings." Reverse Psychology, love you. For the last few years, I've thought, oh my God, Stephen Cummings hates me, because it's the whole reverse psychology. But anyway, this is this came out in 2012. 2014 gave us Nothing to Be Frightened Of. This is more like vocals and guitar. It's got, a folky blues feel to it, really stripped down to the basics, but all new material. Finally, 2019, Prisoner of Love. And this is a really, really cool pop record. It's more upbeat, and this is actually, according to Stephen, he's now retiring, so this is his last studio album, and it's a good one to end on because it's very upbeat. In fact, he's singing in his higher register, closer to the sports, and this is just a fascinating and wonderful. Lots of great songs in here. Two more things I want to talk to you about. I found the CD single, Teacher, I Need You, which is a cover, I think, with the Elton John song. And this was recorded for a soundtrack for Australia. The B-side features 2 album tracks by him. This song I don't think has ended up on anything else but, maybe the soundtrack album, but I've never looked for that because it's just a random Stephen song. The last thing I want to tell you about now, Bloodlines is a label that has reissued all the Stephen Cummings solo material. So for years, some of the stuff would be out of print, but they just issued A Life Is a Life, which is a 4 CD compilation of his hits. Now, the interesting thing about this is if I were to go through Stephen Cummings' entire solo career and pick songs, only maybe a third or maybe even a fourth of what made this box set would be the songs that I would choose. I would choose another 30, 40, 50 songs to put on there instead of some of these other songs that they put on. But that's the great thing about it, is the fact that I have my chosen, 50, 75, 100 Stephen Cummings songs, and then maybe there were some that I didn't connect with in 1993, but would totally love in 2019. So when I go back and listen to this, I'm discovering gems as if I'm listening to these albums again. And I've listened to these albums a ton of times, but it's like, revisiting his catalog and hearing stuff that I maybe didn't pay too much attention to before. It's an investment for somebody who may not know what Stephen Cummings sounds like. But this, by the way, this also has autograph. I guess he keeps telling me something. Leave, Stephen. So, but anyway, that's it with my Stephen Cummings. Now, let me tell you one more thing. Every time that I've made a Stephen Cummings compilation and given it to a friend, I've turned them on to his music. And then all of a sudden their collection starts building. So he's an artist that people who love music will embrace. If you love the sports, you may not like Stephen Cummings' solo material, but then you may love it 10 times more. In fact, I listen to Stephen Cummings solo material more than I listen to sports, and I love the sports. Anyway, that's it for me. I appreciate you hanging out. And until the next time, my name is SPAZ, and I'm a CD junkie.